Hey everybody, Kris White with the American Battlefield Trust, and I'm standing high above Jackson Square here in New Orleans. It's a fantastic day here. We're on top of the Cabildo, which was constructed between 1795 and 1799, and this is a really cool building to come and visit. It's part of the state museum system down here in Louisiana, so you can come down here, learn more about the building, the War of 1812. You can learn about the Louisiana Purchase, because guess what? Right below where we are filming, that room right there is where it happened. That's where the Louisiana Purchase took place. 20 United States were created by that $15 million real estate transaction that took place in 1803. Behind me you might see the bend in the Mississippi River. We call this the Crescent City because we are on the north side of the Mississippi River, and this crescent actually on the river that it sits inside of gives New Orleans a absolute hurricane protection. In fact, whenever New Orleans was created, the threat from hurricanes actually came from the north up towards Lake Pontchartrain, because there were so many cypress trees around us, the miles and miles of cypress trees, that it gave natural protection to New Orleans from hurricane surge. Think about that storm surge we heard about in Hurricane Katrina. That's the deadliest part about it. But for every mile of cypress trees you had down here, 1 foot of hurricane storm surge was actually dissipated. So New Orleans was in a naturally protected place. But coming off the waters of Lake Pontchartrain to the north, that's where you had to worry about the storm surge. Well, New Orleans was founded technically in 1717 on paper, and by 1718 we have a man named Lemoyne Bienville coming down here. I'm not going to go through his whole name, I'll put it on the screen, but Bienville's really awesome. And he is going to come down here. He helps to create the cities of Mobile, Biloxi, and now over here to New Orleans. He makes his way around the Gulf Coast. And now we're looking off into this famous area that we know as the French Quarter, which was laid out, the Vaux Carré was laid out here, the old square, in 1722. Out here in 1722 we'll lay out, I think it's 7 blocks by 11 blocks radius, that old square. But it was all made out of cypress trees. And in 1788 and in 1794 we have 2 great fires that come through here. And by that point, it's a Spanish colony here. Although the French come over here and establish their colony, in 1762 the Treaty of Fontainebleau actually is going to transfer New Orleans over to, and Louisiana, over to the Spanish, because they were both from the Bourbon dynasty of kings, the Spanish and the French. So now we have a new Spanish colony. Down here in the Plaza de Armas, which is today Jackson Square, we would raise that Spanish flag, and that is where we would know that the Spaniards have taken over from us. But in 1794 and 95, we start creating New Orleans as we know it today. So as you look down through here, we have more of a neoclassical as well as a Spanish look, a Spanish appeal to it. It's not really a French town, because they come in here and say, these cypress trees that burned twice within 6 years, these cypress buildings, we're gonna rebuild them out of brick. You'll notice that the streets themselves, some of the most famous streets like Bourbon Street, Canal Street, all of these streets down into here are very close together. You have narrow streets. It's not because it's like Boston that was put up in haphazard fashion. In fact, this is one of the first organized laid out cities in the United States, kind of like Savannah, Georgia, which is a British colony. But those roads are so narrow and those buildings are so close together because it's hot down here. And down through the Caribbean and up into the Gulf, the closer you put your buildings together, the more shade that you have as the sun moves across. So that will keep the city a little bit cooler as you're down here on the banks of the Mississippi River. But down below us, you might see you'll see Andrew Jackson sitting atop his horse. The cornerstone of that monument was laid in 1840 by Jackson himself, and in 1856 it was completed. In the Civil War, whenever this was an occupied city, it was the it was the largest city in the Confederacy, and it was the 8th largest city in the United States. New Orleans will fall in April of 1862 to the Federals, and whenever it falls to the United States, their occupation force is led by a guy named Ben Butler, who New Orleans hated, and they will call him the Beast Butler. And Butler will go out to that statue and he will put he'll put an inscription on the side, this side of Andrew Jackson, adding to it, and we'll put that up on the screen. This union shall be preserved, I believe. I'm doing it off the top of my head. But this is a really cool area. This is an area that most people come down to here in New Orleans. Down at Cafe Du Monde, you might have had your beignets in Cafe au lait. You might have seen a large ship coming up and down the Mississippi River. You might take a riverboat down to Chalmette, down to the battlefield that took place, the War of 1812 that took place, battle in January 1815. And you might have come over to the cathedral. You might have seen this cathedral over here that was the third cathedral on its site. And what would make a French city a city? You had to have a cathedral. But ironically, this isn't a named cathedral until the 1790s, whenever it's under Spanish rule. But the Louisiana Purchase comes through, and in 1803, Louisiana, the Louisiana Territory, which spans from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up to Canada, that is going to take place right here in this building, and that is going to make New Orleans a United States city. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump down from the Cabildo here, and we're going to explore a little bit of New Orleans.